When I play Fast Play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery, I have a chance to win a progressive jackpot that starts at $40,000 and grows from there. So yeah, I'm ready to
play ball!
Make the right call this season and play Fast Play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery.
Good morning, Baltimore. It is Monday, April 6th, and welcome into the latest episode of the Early Birds Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich, alongside Ravens reporter Sam Cohn. Sam, happy Easter here.
Thanks, man.
Sunday afternoon.
And you too.
Do anything fun today? Anything family-wise?
No, I don't celebrate Easter. So I was cleaning up around the apartment and prepping for this podcast.
I wish I could say the same.
How was
driving,
yours? Yeah, you
back
had
and forth. Church late last night, so a whole thing for my family is Easter, but it was good. Saw a lot of people I hadn't seen in a while, so
nice.
It was great.
In honor of Josh, I got a haircut the other day.
Wow, I did. I was wondering. It looked clean.
Yeah, I was watching back the last episode we did, and I definitely knew at that point that I needed a haircut. I used to be like Josh. I wasn't a once a week. I was an every other week. I was getting a haircut twice, maybe 3 times a month, and then when I started growing my hair out, like when I was getting a fade. Or like a skin taper or whatever, I was keeping it clean as often as I could. Once I started growing it out, I'm like a once a month, once every 6 weeks.
I would say my barber saw the clip on Instagram and DM'd me and was like, dude, no, you're totally in the right. I've only, in my 6 years of being a barber, had 3 clients come in once a week, and 2 of them have left town.
Once a week's a lot.
Once a week's a lot.
Yeah.
So shout out John Eric, my guy. I need to go in soon. But no, that's dedication. I respect the game for Josh. He wants to stay clean. I get it. Mm-hmm. You know, I just don't think my bank account could support that kind of commitment to the game.
Yeah, that was me when I was living in Philly. I was probably going every other week, and then they started upping the prices, and I was like, I can't keep doing this. Anyway,
I value my hair too much to get cheap haircuts, so
yeah,
that's the way I feel about it. But it is Easter, which is not great news for the Orioles. It's become an annual tradition for the Orioles to get blown out here.
Twice becomes a tradition.
Yes, I think we are now in the makings of a tradition here for the Baltimore baseball team, which lost 8-2 to the Pirates, got swept over the weekend. We'll talk about that series, but wanted to look back first. I think it's fair to look back at the previous Easter massacre, and that one was truly a massacre a year ago. The Orioles, which Easter last year was a little bit later into the calendar. The Orioles were 21 games in versus 9 games in so far this year, and 24-2 at the hands of the Cincinnati Reds. It was really the first major sign that team was doomed. And just to run through some of the numbers from that game, Orioles' most lopsided loss since 2007, just the 6th time in franchise history. They've allowed 20-plus runs. Charlie Morton, a starter in that game, gave up 7 earned runs in 2 1/3. He fell to 0-5 on the season. The Orioles had lost each of his 5 starts to start the year. Cody Poteet, 5 earned runs in 2 2/3. CNL Perez came in the bullpen, another 3 runs in 2 innings, and then really it became a laughter after the position players took over. Jorge Mateo and Gary Sanchez combining for 9 runs in 2 innings to close it out.
Matt, the reason I wanted to bring this up, and I was hoping that we'd have a chance to talk about this, is not to relive the doom and gloom necessarily of that game, and not to make the one-to-one comparison of what happened on Easter Sunday and where the Orioles are at through a couple weeks into the season versus where they were last year, which was a little bit further in the season. But just to get a sense of, like, it is worth making or thinking about these two and how they're different. So the question I'd ask you, Matt, is what do you remember about that Easter, looking at last season in a vacuum? What do you remember about how your perspective on the team changed at that point in the season?
I mean, it was very early. It's still April, right? And so you still want to believe like this team had earned the benefit of the doubt after 2023 showing what kind of team it was capable of being. 2024, despite the bad second half, still managing to win 91 games and make the playoffs. They had deserved, a slow start without panic. And ultimately, that game kind of showed that, okay, these cracks are kind of real. They had already started to feel some of the injuries on the pitching front in particular. Zach Eflin was already on the IL. Grayson Rodriguez had yet to pitch and would not pitch the entire season. They were about to get Kyle Gibson from his late signing, which obviously didn't turn out to be anything good for them. But, at that point, it was just kind of an eye-opener of like, man, this team could be really bad. Like it definitely I think, started to percolate some doubt. And I mean, within a month, Brandon Hyde was fired. So it definitely, things kind of happened quickly from there.
Yeah, that's and we're going to get into this about like the way people look at this current team. It is far, far, far too early to be sounding any real alarm bells. But because of some similarities, and again, like we do this in baseball, there's 162 games. A couple weeks into the season, there's going to be overreactions. I mean, this in sports just because it's fun to talk about. But there are going to be overreactions to how things unfold. And because expectations do get so high, I mean, just to make the crosstown comparison, like when the Ravens were started 1-4 and going to their bye week, you start to worry. And obviously those games mean a lot more than 8 games in a baseball season, but like you do start to have questions about whether or not they're capable of bouncing back. And the thing that we spent so much time talking about in the lead up to the season on this podcast was who are the guys and do they have the clubhouse for when something like this comes, when adversity does show, can they dig themselves out of a hole? And what we saw last year was the answer was almost definitively no, and it led to Brandon Hyde. For those of us listening, we got Brandon Hyde, AL Manager of the Year for 2023, bobblehead here. It led to his firing, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, he became kind of the scapegoat for that. But I think that you look at that team last year, and we don't have to rehash too much what went wrong with the 2025 Orioles. It's definitely been documented. But the rotation with Charlie Morton having that outing that he did that day, probably the pinnacle of his, for lack of a better word, sucking to start the year.
Yeah.
It would just kind of show, okay, Charlie Morton is not really that guy. Even though he actually did end up finishing kind of strong with the Orioles, ended up, getting traded and all that. But he was kind of the face of the bad start, Brandon Hyde being fired and everything in terms of the rotation being bad. But, that group that they had last year was kind of thrown together in terms of pitching. And, it's a very different team now. Mm-hmm. That group that was put together, of all those guys, the 14 players to appear in that game for the Orioles, only 5 remain with the team, and only 2 are everyday players currently in Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson. So that was a very different team than what we have on the field now. But I think that last year fans got a little bit mad at people who didn't let them freak out a little bit, almost like they were being gaslit because they saw early on what the Orioles didn't do in the offseason, said it wasn't enough, and eventually some of those cracks showed and proved to be their downfall. I think that this year, yes, it is too early to panic about the 2026 Orioles, but if you have some leftover scars from that a little bit, I don't blame you. I think that that's fair. I think you do have to look at every team independently, and the fate of the 2026 Orioles can't really be determined on April 5th or 6th, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But I think that when you do have a game like we saw with the Easter Massacre last year, I think there was a stat in my gamer from that day that no team had ever lost by 20-plus runs in a game and then won the World Series. Not to say that they were ruled out at that point, but, I mean, they were in company that would have been historic.
By that stat, they were mathematically eliminated.
There it is. So, yeah, that was an eye-opening game for sure. And, man, that clubhouse, you could hear a pin drop when you walked in afterwards.
Yeah, that was rough. And, that was a red-letter date of last year's team and a real turning point. Flipping the page to this year, you mentioned there's so many guys who the roster looks in a lot of ways completely different. Why do you have more? The obvious question: why do you have so much more confidence after how slowly they've started and another? I'm not going to call it a massacre, but an Easter beatdown in a game that they should have been able to get at least. Albie said this on Sunday. They should have been able to get at least one win in this series. Now, what are they? 3-6.
Mm-hmm.
What gives you that much more confidence in what you've seen from them so far compared to how you were feeling on Easter last year, which we should mention Easter came a couple weeks later in April compared to this year. So they had a few more games under their belt and things looked a little bit different. You have a little bit bigger of a sample size to understand them. Why do you feel differently about this team?
I mean, 2 of those games that the Orioles lost against the Pirates were 1-run games, could have gone either way. That happens, and we're talking about, you get a series win in Chicago and you have a 500 road trip any team will take that. I think it's so early where, a 3-game deficit doesn't mean a whole lot. Yes, 2 games count the same in April as they do in September. Absolutely. You want to win every one to put yourself in the best position come the stretch run. But, this team last year, they didn't have Kyle Bradish. They didn't have Pete Alonso. They didn't have Taylor Ward. I mean, these are superstar caliber players, guys who, could be starting in the All-Star game. And, for the Orioles to have those guys as veterans, I mean, I get Chris Bassett has not been very good so far. I'm not, writing his obituary just yet. I don't think he's Charlie Morton, as people have liked to throw out there. There's still a lot of time for that. I think we're going to see Dean Kramer into the rotation here in the next week or so, with Cade Povich taking the spot start, although he had to get thrown into the game on Sunday, so it looks like it'll be Albert Suarez probably on Monday. But, I do think that this team overall, on top of the moves they made last offseason, which I think were better moves than the moves that were made a year before, they're just another year older. They're another year healthier. You don't have Jackson Holliday right now. You don't have Jordan Westburg. But other than that, everybody on that field is healthy. I mean, this time last year, you had Gunnar Henderson just coming back from an intercostal strain that he suffered in spring training, which he might have been rushed back a little bit from that. Colton Cowser had just broken his thumb diving in headfirst into first base.
Classic.
Jordan Westburg came into the season banged up, playing through some things. So this team, yes, is it a bad start so far? Absolutely, but I'm not necessarily hitting the panic button just yet.
And they aren't either. The guys in the clubhouse are acknowledging that they need to be winning these kinds of games, but that at the end of the day, it's about how they're sort of in that before things go bad and you start to really unravel. They're in that teetering on, we know we have the talent. They're saying a lot of the things that the last year's team did, and that teams all around the league say when you have a slow start is, we have the guys in this clubhouse to turn things around. It's just a matter of whether or not we can do it. You touched on it a little bit there, but what's your concern level? Where would you put it? I tried to come up with maybe some kind of game we could do here, but just what's your concern? I could. I'm not that funny. I couldn't think.
Yeah, if we're out of 10 here, I'm probably out of 4. I mean, is it a bad start? Yes, but I think that a lot of the things that have happened so far are reversible. Do I expect Kyle Bradish to have a 6 ERA or whatever it is so far? Absolutely not. Do I expect Shane Baz to be pitching into the 6th inning more often like he did in his last start? Absolutely. Do I expect Andrew Kittredge and Keegan Aiken to come into this bullpen and help settle things down a little bit? Yes. I mean, there are things that are kind of unsettled with this team right now. Yes, the offense has kind of underwhelmed so far, but we've also seen a couple of good performances from them too, particularly late in games, stringing hits together for rallies. I mean, it's has kind of come up short a little bit, but they've made good ABS challenges for the most part. I think that overall, everybody in that clubhouse is saying we just got to stay the course, everything like that. And, I'm not in Pittsburgh. I'm going to be flying out to Chicago the morning of the show coming out and can kind of gauge things then. But I imagine that right now guys are, feel pretty confident still about where this thing's at. And, I've seen no reason to throw in the towel here on April 5th.
Yeah, of course not. And I put in our notes doc, I think I'm just for sake of playing devil's advocate, you mentioned Bradish, his ERA is 6.23. That's probably not going to last, but it's not great to see that. It's not great to see Eflin on the IR so early in the season. We mentioned Bassett got beat up now twice. And even giving those guys a little bit of grace to settle into whatever this season is going to look like for them and to acknowledge that it is still early April. When you look at the rotation, which is a huge question mark or huge, the spotlight is on it considering how poorly they were last year, obviously different group, but considering the spotlight on them, the bats have not given them enough relief to have those not great days. Like you mentioned, they've strung together some nice hitting stretches here and there, but they haven't really given the pitching staff enough of a chance to have those rough stretches or to really settle into things. I think that's why I'm leaning the other way. And more than anything, it's just we had this conversation last year. You mentioned scar tissue earlier. To me, the concern level is not. I'm not waving a flag. I'm not pressing any alarm buttons. But to me, the concern level is more about we had this conversation last year than it is based on reality of the current team is what I'm trying to say.
Right. And, that's a fan base thing more than it is a players thing. I mean, They bring in a new manager too. Like, Craig Albernaz has no leftover feelings from last year. He wasn't a part of it and really is trying to push the whole clean slate thing. So, and the front office did too. Right now on the Orioles 26-man roster, 18 of the players on the Orioles' current active roster did not play a single game for the Brandon Hyde Orioles last year. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's 3/4 of the team right there that you have completely was not involved, whether it was because of injury, whether because they weren't in the organization, or whether because they were in the minor leagues. This is a new team. It's a team with, it has some of the same core guys, certainly, but those guys probably grew from that experience a little bit. You'd like to hope so, that they were able to take some lessons out of what happened last year. And from talking from guys, it does seem like they've gained a little bit more perspective and maybe been humbled a little bit. So I'd expect, a team with this different kind of veteran leadership that they didn't have last year would be better capable of pulling out of an early hole like this. I mean, 3 games in April is nothing to get super worried about. Now, it's the play on the field that, like, if you came into this year, saying like, okay, things I'm worried about are injuries, the defense, and the bullpen. Like, all 3 of those things are kind of concerning right now. Like, those are things that like might trickle down and continue to be a problem. But if they can start to settle in on some of those fronts, I think that they're going to be just fine.
Matt, you wrote, I'm not going to gaslight fans and tell them that they aren't allowed to be skeptical.
You are allowed to be skeptical.
I'd like you to gaslight. No, I'm just kidding.
You can be skeptical of optimism here. The 2025 Orioles had earned the benefit of the doubt, and they squandered it. That's on them. It is now up to the 2026 Orioles to earn that trust back. So they don't necessarily have the benefit of the doubt going for them now because of the season that they just had last year. And it's going to take a good run of good, clean baseball, of hitting like we expect them to, of the rotation kind of handing the baton off and having good starts to start, the bullpen providing some stability on the back end, and Craig Albernaz, looking like a seasoned manager. All of those things have to come together, and this team needs to basically help the fan base move on with the play that it has on the field.
Can I put you on the spot here with a question? 2024, Albert Suarez kind of came out of nowhere. That was 24, right? If you were to say there's one guy on this team who over the next month is going to be the unexpected help really drive this team back in the right direction, who's going to have performance after performance, so you start to say, okay, he's really the one that's like making sure that they're not really falling off the rails here. Who do you think that guy might be?
I mean, honestly, I think Taylor Ward has been a great trendsetter for the top of the top of the lineup so far. Between working a lot of deep counts and getting on base via walks, but hits as well. If he can start to hit for a little bit more power too, I think that this lineup is going to kind of be a gauntlet at the top, because I think Gunnar Henderson and Pete Alonso, Adley Rutschman, they're going to get theirs. But if Taylor Ward can continue this kind of hot start that he's had out of that leadoff spot, I truly think that this lineup, it's only a matter of time before it starts to look more like a murderer's row. So, Albert Suarez was truly a, minor league signing that they rehabilitated into a major league caliber player. Do they have anybody that's like that right now? Maybe some guys in the bullpen, like a Grant Wolfram, could fit that mold. Jeremiah Jackson was somebody they signed in minor league free agency and has had some flashes of success at the major league level. Whether he sticks at the roster once Jackson Holiday comes back remains to be seen. But, I think that they could come from a lot of different places, and that's what winning teams do. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to hit on your big signings, you got to hit on your draft picks, all of that. But a team that can scrape the bottom of the barrel and come up with diamonds, those are the teams that are able to weather situations like in 24.
And when the Orioles decided not to put Dean Kramer on that opening day roster, showed, I think, in a lot of ways, like they don't have as much confidence as maybe some thought that they did. How do you envision this Dean Kramer, Cade Povich, Albert Suarez triangle playing out? I
mean, I see Suarez being a swing man right now, and maybe he's probably going to start on Monday, given that Cade Povich had to pitch out of the bullpen because Chris Bassett only went 2 innings on Sunday. But I would imagine Povich goes back down once Kramer is eligible to return. Kramer had to stay down in the minor leagues a minimum 15 days, which is why he wasn't able to be called up for this start here on Monday. But I don't know that it was necessarily a reflection on their feelings about Dean Kramer sending him down. I think it truly was. They had 6 major league caliber starting pitchers, and rather than put guys on extra rests or anything like that to start the year, send Dean down, and they knew that they would be able to go to a 6-man rotation later. Unfortunately, the Zach Eflin injury has cropped up earlier than expected, which we're still waiting on results on that. It seems like he's getting a second opinion now on his elbow, so TBD on that, but certainly doesn't bode well. I think that Kramer is going to be just fine as a back-end guy. Povich will represent the next man up in AAA Norfolk, and you'll have Albert Suarez there as a guy who can be available in the bullpen to give you 3 or 4 innings in a situation like we just saw with Chris Bassett or any starter that has to exit early.
Bottom line, and I'm assuming you had Easter on the mind when you wrote this, that no one on the Orioles roster has risen to the level of concern of Charlie Morton.
Yeah, I would say
which is an obvious point, but we're not there yet.
Charlie Morton was colossally bad to start last year, and we're only 2 starts in for Chris Bassett, so obviously if things continue that way, there's going to be more and more concern there, given he's 35. I mean, he's not nearly as old as Charlie Morton was last year, but no, I would not say that my panic meter, from what it was about Charlie Morton, where it was like, man, how long are they going to ride this out? I don't think I'm at that point with anyone on the roster, and it is just too early to get to that point.
Can I ask you one more? They're only 9 games into the season, but so much of the conversation we did have leading into the season was like, how does Craig Albernaz deal with his first stint of adversity?
Ejected today, by the way.
Ejected. I was going to say we should have maybe led with this. How have you seen him handle managerially from the dugout, but also facing the cameras? Just how is he? What's your impression of how he's handled this roster?
I mean, I just think he's consistent. Craig Albernaz is Craig Albernaz. And I have a funny story from spring training. I interviewed Donnie Ecker, their bench coach, who has known Albernaz a long time. And when I went over to talk to Donnie, Craig came out and was like kind of ribbing him, giving him a hard time. And he was like, his job is to keep me from getting ejected. And I asked Donnie, what's the over-under on how many games into the season Craig Albernaz gets ejected? What would you say to 10.5? And he just said no comment. And here we are at 9 games.
Wow.
9 games.
You said 10.5?
I said 10.5. Great line by me. Great line.
Well done.
It was only a matter of time with him. He has some great stories about his ejections in the minor leagues. Certainly brings some fire in between the lines. But no, I think that overall his demeanor, I think, has worked so far. I think the guys have resonated with it. But we've reached it. We're already here. Yeah. This is the true test, right? Does it still hold up when things are going bad and guys are looking for reasons not to follow along to your overall mission? And how can you rein them back in? And he's gonna rely on veteran leaders in the clubhouse to help him with that for sure. But this is where being a trendsetter, which is exactly what the Orioles wanted in a manager and what they hope they have gotten in Craig Albernaz, this is where a trendsetter has to step up and make sure that a team stays on track, because you see it with young teams all the time. When things go bad, there's one thing to have a 3-game losing streak get swept. That happens to almost every team across the course of the season. But when it becomes a 4-game, a 5-game, a 6-game, 7-game,
didn't happen to the Orioles for how long?
Yeah, that's true. It didn't happen in 2023. Yeah, it went from 22 to 24 without being swept. Yeah. So. Did not happen in 23, but that's pretty rare. It was a historic run that they went on. But even the Dodgers got swept last year, I'm pretty sure. So it happens to even the best of teams, worst teams. It's how teams rebound from it. And luckily, they have the Chicago White Sox up next.
I was going to say Chicago and then Arizona, right?
Chicago, then San Francisco, then Arizona.
Okay,
and San Francisco, Arizona are at home.
What's your guess projection? Do you envision Chicago just being like a get right couple days?
It should be. I mean, the last time Kyle Bradish pitched against the White Sox, he carried a no-hitter into the 8th inning, I believe. So, there's definitely some good vibes with that. It's also the place where the Orioles officially were eliminated from the playoffs last year. So maybe some good and bad vibes with the White Sox stadium. But, I would say that this team is fully capable of sweeping the White Sox. They should be a better team than the team that has probably had the worst record in baseball over the last 3 seasons. Even though they did make some decent moves this offseason. And then going into San Francisco and Arizona, I mean, those are games at home. You should win those series. Those are teams that have playoff aspirations, but are kind of like the Orioles that are on the bubble. So,
Yeah.
that's where the Pirates kind of are too. I mean, the Pirates are not coming off a great year, but they made some big moves over the offseason. Ryan O'Hearn had some big hits against the Orioles there on Sunday. They called up Connor Griffin, #1 prospect in this series, which is really cool. Has his first career hit as our RBI double off of Kyle Bradish to score Ryan O'Hearn. So there's a bit of trivia for later, who was Connor Griffin's first RBI.
Nice.
Ryan O'Hearn. But that Pirates team has playoff aspirations, and sweeping the Orioles for them is a great measuring stick series for them of like, hey, maybe we can actually do this. Maybe we made some good enough moves this offseason to really compete in the NL Central. Orioles got to kind of do the same thing now here. They should beat the White Sox. They should take care of business against them. I think those next 2 series after that are going to really tell where they're kind of at here early on in the season.
You fly to Chicago or deep dish pizza, yay or nay?
I've had it twice, and I think I'm good now.
Okay.
Like,
You did the thing.
I did the thing. Like, the first piece is always good.
Yeah.
But when I got the first time I got one of those like personal pizzas, that was fine. I had that. It was good. Second time I got a full pizza for myself. And after like 2 or 3 pieces of that, man, I was like, it sat like a rock in your stomach. So I actually haven't had the tavern style pizza, which people from Chicago say that's like what real Chicago people. Yeah, apparently it's
What's
only
the difference?
It's a touristy thing. So tavern style is like thin crust.
Okay.
Sheet kind of pizza, sheet pan pizza type looking thing, which I'm not a big thin crust guy, but I have a buddy who lives out there. He says he's going to take me to his favorite pizza place. So I'll have reviews for you Wednesday night.
The next time we meet.
Yep.
Love
it.
it.
So looking forward to getting out to Chicago here after a weekend of handing things off to Jacob Calvin Meyer. Appreciate him handling the reins for us. We're going to go ahead and switch over to Ravens right after this.
Every spring when the Orioles start hitting homers, you know it's time for Fast Play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery, with a chance to win cash instantly and other great prizes. But this season, the game is even better. Enter the Second Chance promotion through My Lottery Rewards, and you could win a new bonus prize, a VIP game day experience, including premium seat access. Enjoy the game you've always loved with a whole new way to win. Play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery. Please play responsibly.
And we're back to talk Ravens offseason program, which begins today, April 6th. Ravens are in the building at the Castle. It is truly the start of the Jesse Minter era. Everything up until now has been talk and planning behind the scenes, but now is when action actually begins. Break down what is actually happening in Owings Mills this week.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's been talk. Jesse Minter didn't say a whole lot, didn't give up much information about much of anything while he was at owners' meetings. Obviously, Brian Wacker was down there covering it for us. He has said everything has been a sprint to April 6th, and now they're going to be in meeting rooms with new coaches. They're going to be in weight rooms with strength and conditioning staff. They're going to get a chance to spend time with these guys. They're going to be building relationships. These next few weeks are let's introduce each other, let's build relationships, let's build a foundation, let's introduce playbooks, let's start thinking about what the long-term plans of this team are going to look and feel like. And within the Owings Mills, there's obviously a lot of people focused on late April, which is the NFL draft. So it's the first chance for, Jesse Minter has said, like, he's spent time on the phone with several players. He's had a chance to meet and connect with a bunch of guys in person. Obviously, he was at Camden Yards, was a Flowers. So, like, there are several guys he's had a chance to be with, but Jesse was saying he's really excited, to really spend time. He has said this several times, this is his superpower. What he's best at is building relationships and connecting with guys, and his number one priority is making sure that they're all on the same page, because good football, in his mind, does not come until you have good relationships and a good foundation built within the building. So while they're in meeting rooms and while they're going over introductions and while they're getting a chance to know each other and while they're starting to talk football, there's going to be a lot of pre-football talk before they get to the real stuff. And then obviously a lot of these guys will just be working out together again for the first time. You're going to see who's there.
Yes, that is maybe the start of these pressing questions that I have for you, and just kind of want to, not rapid fire, but go through some questions here that you have, heading into what, like I said, truly is the start of the Jesse Minter era. And I'll loop these first two together. Will Lamar Jackson or Nnamdi Madubuike be there? What's your prediction? What's just your
Sure.
temperature check on it?
I'm going to give an annoying answer. I don't want to speculate too much.
Sure.
Because it is important every time we talk about this.
And this is for OTAs, or is it for, are you asking, are they going to be in the building this week in general too?
All of the above.
Okay.
Because we're likely to find out on Wednesday when we're supposed to meet with strength and conditioning coach Scott Elliott, and several players will be made available. You would think if you would think if QB1 is in the building that he will be one of those players. So we'll get a sense this week whether or not he's there. Lamar is the kind of guy who has gone in and out, has been there some days and not others. He's met certain criteria within his contract to get a little bit of a bonus to be there, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it is all important that we start this segment every time with this is voluntary. So he doesn't have to be there. But it does mean a lot when Declan Doyle, the new offensive coordinator, says at his introductory press conference, championship standards start with the work that is done. We are now in the time that he was referring to, which is now April, May, June, when the stuff is all voluntary. That's when championship expectations start. Declan Doyle came in. He's, how old are you?
I'm 29.
He's your age. Came down and laid the hammer. Said, I want these guys here. He didn't call anybody out specifically. He didn't say Lamar Jackson specifically, but he said that if we want to be a championship caliber team, that's what he's looking for, is guys to show up now. So think someone your age being, saying stuff like that. So that'll
Make me feel old. Someone your age. I'm not that much older than you.
I know. You're only a couple years older than I am. So it's interesting to hear Declan Doyle say something like that, and then Jesse Minter at owners' meetings say, we'll see who walks in that door, but above all else, Lamar Jackson is excited about the plan that they have in place. That leads me to believe that he might be there. Lamar might be there for some. He might not be there for others, or at least that Jesse Minter is not going to put Lamar in a position where if he doesn't want to be there, like he's not forcing his quarterback to be there, but obviously it sounds like he'd love for him to be there, and that whether or not he's there, he still has confidence in Lamar's ability to get up to speed with the new staff and playbook, et cetera, et cetera, et cether. So whether or not, who knows?
Does a contract, not having a contract extension, factor into that at all in your calculus?
The cards are in being in his hands, at least a little bit. But I think more of this has to do with just his willingness to come up to Baltimore from South Florida for time in the offseason, which he's been playing at an MVP level for several years, and generally he's not loved to do that. He likes to spend more of his time in sunny Florida. But with it being a new staff, does that give him a little kick in the pants to maybe spend a little bit more time knowing this season is a little bit more important to have that time in the offseason? Because this is his fourth offensive coordinator, third or fourth offensive coordinator he's had in his career. So I do think he needs to have that extra time. The question, of course, is how much, and his ability to pick up on these things happens a lot quicker than you or I would process anything like this. Nnamdi is, what a question mark. What an interesting saga this is.
We just don't know.
Yeah,
we have no clue.
We just don't really know. And they haven't said a lot. I read about this the other day, that one Ravens decision maker after another has given one vague answer after another. And sure, there's a chance that they don't fully know where he's going to be at. I think it was Sashi Brown had said that it's a matter of he's going to have conversations with Eric DeCosta as they get closer. We've seen the workout videos. He looks like he's in NFL ready shape. He looks like he's a beast. He looks like he's ready to get back out there. But perhaps there is a delta between being in NFL ready shape and being actually ready to go out and play live football. And perhaps they need more doctors' opinions, not to invoke the not to be named almost Raven on this podcast, but perhaps they need another doctor's opinion before they figure things out. Or obviously you want the best for Nnamdi and his personal health and his longevity, but the Ravens could really use him if he's able and willing and ready to go. The other interesting tidbit with that was that Eric DeCosta has said that is such an important position and a premier position. And again, this is just part of him kind of hiding whatever it is that is going on and not being willing or interested to share much. But he was asked, based on his situation, whether or not he's there, does that influence his thinking of drafting along the defensive line? And he was like, it's just such an important position. It's something we're always going to be looking at. Sure, but you're going to be looking at it a lot differently if Nnamdi Nnamdi
if you really do need help with the pass rush, as opposed to somebody who you're hopeful to have involved is a big difference
so
at such a key position.
Exactly. So I don't want to speculate too much, but it will be interesting to see whether or not, one, they're there this week, or as we get closer to real OTAs later in the month. OTAs are in May. Rookie minicamp starts early May. Yeah, once we get into next month, whether or not Lamar and Nnamdi are there in the building. Because I feel like at the end of the day with Nnamdi, we've learned so little in September, October, November, December, January, February. It's been a while. We don't really know a whole lot. I feel like it's just going to come down to we're going to show up one day and he's going to be there.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to get any formal anything.
Or you'll show up one day and be told that he's not coming back.
That's right.
It's probably nothing in between.
Because for so long, it was John Harbaugh told us, Eric DeCosta told us, I think Steve Bisciotti said at one point, everyone in the Ravens front office and coaching staff said, it's when the time comes for him to tell us what is going on, he will tell us. So maybe he'll tell us soon, maybe he won't.
Probably not.
But those will be two interesting things to follow, about whether those two will be there.
Absolutely. Moving right along, how might Jesse Minter mess around with the offseason schedule? He's expressed some openness to some joint practices, I assume.
Yeah, so the way John Harbaugh ran things was the same for many years, especially during the Lamar Jackson era, and they really got a lot out of joint practices. Obviously, they practiced with the Colts last year. Jesse Minter was asked in owners' meetings about it. He said that nothing has been finalized, but they're working on some stuff, and they'd like to have some joint practices during training camp. The interesting thing I thought, the more interesting thing I thought that came out of that was John Harbaugh for years has practiced in the afternoon. It was always like early afternoon. The sun is blazing on them. Hot training camp practices. Jesse Minter sort of teased the idea of, and I think this is a really interesting, good idea. He's like, let's move some stuff around. Let's have some practices in the morning. Let's have some practices at night, and then you show up the next morning for a practice. And just like, because you're playing on Thursday nights and Sunday day and Sunday night and Monday night, and shoot, they might, I don't know if the Ravens will be involved, but we're probably going to get a Wednesday night game at some point. I'm waiting for the day the NFL says, all right, we want Saturday too. So he wants to do that in the spirit of just getting guys ready for the movement in the schedule and wanting some differences and changes. So it'll be interesting to see just kind of how he readies that, because that John Harbaugh just did it his way and one way for so long. Teams do things very differently. Every coach does their own thing. Some teams practice, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think Jim Harbaugh, most of his practices are before noon or in the morning. I think he practices most. So we're interesting to see whether Jesse kind of moves some puzzle pieces around to get his guys ready for training camp. And then the other thing that came up, and this is a conversation for later in the summer, but that he didn't close the door on the idea of starters playing in the preseason. That if he feels it's all about timing and feel on a specific player, whether those guys end up seeing preseason reps.
Well, it's something we saw from the Bengals last year after all the slow starts that they've had in the years past of trying to get off to a good start. And, of course, fate is a twisted enemy. To have the fast start that they had only for Joe Burrow to get hurt, certainly was a twist of the knife in the back. But
Joe Burrow, who's juking out YouTubers.
Oh, my gosh, I know.
You want to talk about needing to take care of your body?
Commanders fan, watching Jaden Daniels play like wide receiver, too, is like...
Oh, my God, what are we doing?
I don't know. I don't know.
Don't let the Paul brothers anywhere near any NFL players.
Please, I'm begging. You mentioned we're going to be hearing from strength and conditioning coordinator Scott Elliott. He's one of the few holdovers from John Harbaugh's staff. What kind of questions do you expect him to be fielding, and what maybe insights can he give into the status of where players are at this stage of the offseason?
Yeah, I think first impressions, the guys always come back from the offseason like I'm in the best shape of my life. I think his first couple days spending time with these guys, where they look different, what he hopes to get out of some of these guys, because a lot of times, I'm trying to remember, it was Odafe Oweh came into last season and was like, I put on a ton of weight. I walked off the field in that Bills game and was like, I wasn't big enough and I wasn't strong enough. And he spent his entire summer readying his body. And obviously it didn't show the first few weeks in Baltimore, but it wound up helping earn him a $100 million contract in Washington after his time in Los Angeles. Just to use that example, Mike Green, I asked him the same thing at the end of this past season. I know you and Josh last week talked about how he kind of came on later in the season and how they really see a lot of value in what he's going to be able to bring to this team. I asked Mike Green, I was like, do you feel like weight is a thing that like you need to put on some weight? Like, what were your main takeaways? And he was like, I feel like I'm at a good weight. Like, that's not part of what he envisioned for his sophomore jump. So hearing from Scott Elliott a little bit about, of course we'll hear a little of who's in the building, but just his impression of how guys have fluctuated a little bit and what his plan and how maybe the plans change based on the new staff. They also have I'm blanking on his specific title right now, but Dr. Nick Gill is a new position that they've created, who comes from one of the most iconic rugby teams on the planet, the New Zealand All Blacks. And what he does, I think that'll be an important question for Scott, of just like, what does his role look like? This is a new position you guys have in Baltimore. How does that change things? And hearing a little bit too from Scott of like how he's one of only a handful of holdovers from John Harbaugh's staff. Just what's been his impression of getting a chance to work with some of these new guys on staff, and how things might change, and how the offseason plan has changed a little bit, and whether or not he's adjusting his game plan this summer to better mesh with what Jesse Minter's plan, or whether he feels like he can kind of stick to what he's always done and that will still align with, or just kind of how he's moving pieces around there.
Yeah, I know some of the coaches on the Orioles standpoint that I was most looking forward to talking to this spring were the holdovers from last year's staff into this, of just being like, what's changed around here? Like, what are you seeing? Because I think that's the best barometer of what went wrong last year, what things are being done to fix it, what are the new faces kind of changing. So somebody like Elliott to be able to do that, but also somebody who gets a real intimate and up close personal view of these guys. I don't know how much can be done in, I guess, 2.5 months since the offseason began, but there's still a lot of offseason to go. But certainly this is an important checkpoint for a lot of guys coming into the building for the first time in a couple of months, and the team kind of getting their hands on them again.
Yeah, and just one more point to stick with the Mike Green theme. I feel like I think every team maybe has this. It's whether it's one or two guys who are like your social media workout warrior. I think it will play into Mike Green's benefit, but more than anyone else on the Ravens, he's been the guy who you've seen the most clips on social media of him working. His bend coming around the edge looks ridiculous. Like, I do think, and Jesse Minter said it, I think Sashi Brown or Eric Costa might have said something similar too, but like, they do have a lot of faith in Mike Green making that sophomore jump, and he's been the guy we've seen the most workout videos of. Nnamdi Madubuike has been the most like, we've seen a couple and we're all, what does this mean? Mike Green has been a lot more of like, okay, you can see, which if they're not, we saw Ben Simmons work out every offseason, and what did that do? So you can never put too much
You're
stock.
not jaded though.
You can never put too much stock into it, but you start to wonder about that kind of thing, and how much that can help, and just what Scott Elliott's first impression of hearing about and seeing that will be.
Sure. And another thing that was a bit of a leftover tidbit from the owners' meetings that we didn't dive into on the last episode, but Jesse Minter talked about Tyler Loop and expressed his confidence in the young kicker coming off of his rookie season, in which he was largely excellent, but obviously missed the game-winning kick in what ended up being the end of their season there at the end of the year against the Steelers. Minter said about Tyler Loop, "We have a lot of confidence," end quote, but also are apparently open to bringing in some competition. Is that something that you think is a frugal decision for them?
I think yes, but I know you think differently, so I want to hear you talk first.
Look, I just think that you have a young player that you brought in to be the guy exclusively, pretty much. He looked great in camp. He won the job, did fairly well over the course of a full season, and had one terrible moment, right? A terrible moment that for a young player can kill a psyche, right? And I think if I'm Jesse Minter, like the larger sample size tells me that Tyler Loop was a good kicker, I want to be all in on confidence of Tyler Loop. I want to say it's his job. We're not worried about him. Like, we have full belief in the kid. Go. I don't need him second guessing himself for any reason, whether it be because I brought in a veteran to push him. I mean, yes, if they just bring in somebody who you probably don't expect to make the team, Tyler Loop has a 99% chance of making it, and you just want a guy in his ear, sure, as a kind of a second coach, I get that. But anything less than that, I think could be maybe have adverse effects on a young player who's coming off of probably their worst moment of their life.
I definitely do not disagree. based on what we saw from Loop in his rookie year and based on all the confidence they've had, Steve Bisciotti flat out said at the season end press conference, Tyler Loop is going to be the kicker next year. He is their kicker of the future. For how long, who knows? Obviously, how he does in 2026 and beyond will determine that. But they have flat out said he will be the kicker. I do think bringing in someone like John Hoyland last year. The Ravens didn't draft Loop with the expectation that some former college kicker who they pick up off the street is gonna really compete for the job. And Hoyland was really solid throughout training camp, and it looked at times like this could be a legitimate competition. But it was always going to be Loop. I think that, and you mentioned like there are possible adverse effects. You do have to weigh the fact, the psyche of him coming off last season. But I just think having another kicker in that room, they do have some continuity with Randy Brown. He's, again, one of the couple holdovers from John Harbaugh's staff. So his primary coach is still in his ear. He'll have a different holder. So having someone else holding the kicks and someone else he's working closely with in that room being different might make things a little bit tougher, and that maybe you don't want a third person in the room. So I think it's a fair argument to say that, like, just let the kid own training camp and do the best he can. But I think bring in someone else just to push him a little bit, just to give him a day off or two, just to change the schedule a little bit, I think in the end of the day can really help. Just someone even to bounce, like another kicker to bounce ideas off of, to learn from one another. Because, I mean, both John Hoyland and Loop, those two had admitted, like, they learned a lot from one another. I talked to folks during training camp who said, like, Loop had talked to one of Loop's former coaches who said that Tyler Loop felt like he learned a lot from John Hoyland. So it was never going to be John Hoyland, but, like, Loop can stand to gain from someone even if it's not his, even if it's his job to lose.
I'm open to that, certainly. I'm a big believer in Tyler Loop. I really liked what we saw from him last year. He has a great leg for both from distance, but also just accuracy wise, was really consistent from kick to kick, and to go from a would-be Hall of Fame player in Justin Tucker at the position, I felt like it wasn't much of a drop-off, especially if the season that Tucker had leading up to this. I mean, I felt like he really did restore stability to that position, and I think just the question now for him is, is that missed kick going to be a learning opportunity, or is it something that is going to continue to haunt him? And, maybe that's something you have to evaluate in camp, and all of a sudden he has the yips, and the good thing you have a John Hoyland type, because you might have to need a fallback option, but I don't think he will. I'm willing to gamble a little bit and say that Tyler Loop, I'll stick my neck out a little bit and say I think Tyler Loop is going to be just fine. My cause for concern from him is a 0. And all I would want to do is put him in the best, mental position to go into next year confident about his abilities.
I agree, and this is not a crazy take at all, but, like, if he gets 1, maybe 2, end of fourth quarter, meaningful kicks during the season, I think that Pittsburgh game ends differently. He just didn't have, this was talked ad nauseum after that game, but he just didn't have the experience. Like, to put a rookie in that position is so tough. So, and you do expect him, because of the way he played, to make a 44-yard field goal, but he's walking out there with the entire season on the line and the yellow flags waving and the weird weather conditions of playing up in Pittsburgh. Like, just put him in those positions during the season, and if you get to that point, I think in year 2, he'll be a lot more ready to sink that kick.
Yeah, it's certainly going to come down to confidence in him throughout the year to use him in those spots. That'll speak much louder than anything that they do personnel-wise here in training camp. Now, last thing here, and this is a bit more of an open-ended question, but is there anything else the Ravens need to do in free agency or the trade market leading up to the draft? We're about 2.5 weeks now away from the start of the NFL draft. The dust has mostly settled from NFL free agency. They obviously had forayed into the trade market only to back out and sign Trey Hendrickson. Do you feel like there is still potential for a big move to be made here as the roster they start to look at this draft board and start to really fit some puzzle pieces in?
I do. I think it was interesting to hear Jesse Minter say at owners' meetings that tight end is a position that they feel like there's a lot of time between now and September, and they have every intention of adding to that room. And maybe that's in the draft if they find a way. If Oregon's Kenyon Sadiq falls to them at 14, and that changes their draft strategy a little bit, or can't imagine they trade up. But, like, outside of maybe they replace Isaiah Likely in the 3rd or 4th round of the draft. That's probably the more likely situation, but there are a handful of free agent tight ends out there who, if they don't see a path necessarily in the draft, like maybe we talked about David Njoku was visited with them, Jonnu Smith, Taysom Hill, Zach Ertz, Will Dissly, Darren Waller. None of those names should excite anybody.
Darren Waller looked great last year, man. What are you talking about in his 2 games before he got hurt?
Yeah. But there a lot of smart draft people have said this is the Athletics' Dane Brugler, who is the top draft mind, I think, of anybody. I don't think that's going too far on a limb here, but he has said that this might be the deepest tight end draft class he's seen in a long time. So because of that, and Jesse Minter saying they'd like to add to that room, I'd more envision them using maybe if they don't go for Kenyon Sadiq, which I would like to think they'd probably use an offensive line, use their first round pick on an offensive lineman. They probably try to go day 2, day 3 with a tight end. That would be my first one. And then just to give you the other 2 quickly, Jadeveon Clowney, a lot of Ravens fans saw him on a social media video saying he'd welcome a return to Baltimore. It's on the older side, but maybe you look at that room and say, Trey Hendrickson can still give you a lot. Mike Green is going to take the lead. You really like what you have in Tavius Robinson's ascension. Jadeveon Clowney is going to give you more than if you were to bring back Kyle Van Noy. That just helps the room.
And Lamar said he would, quote, definitely want him back on Twitter.
Lamar was on social media saying, I would definitely welcome him back. So Clowney, they'd like to add to that edge rusher spot, whether that's Clowney or elsewhere, remains to be seen, but I certainly think it's something. And then, of course, the hot name on the market is Juwan Jennings. He's the top wide receiver on this free agent market right now. Physical blocker, too, which they could really use. And he had 15 tutties over the past 2 seasons. But the big question here is the money, whether or not they're willing to spend it, because I looked earlier today, Spotrac has his market value calculated to about 22.6, which would make him the 4th highest paid Raven. I don't think the Ravens want to spend that kind of money on bringing another wide receiver, but I think a lot of people might have expected Juwan Jennings to be signed weeks ago, and he hasn't. So maybe the market slows down a little bit, and maybe they end up in a position like they did with Trey Hendrickson, where the player thought he could demand a lot more money. Teams weren't willing to meet that price. The price goes down a little bit, and the Ravens can jump on it right at the right time. So
yeah, Jennings is an interesting case because he held out a little bit with San Francisco looking for a long-term deal, did not end up getting that deal, and now maybe has overplayed his hand a little bit in looking for the contract that he wants. And a lot of the teams that might have had cap space for moves like that, including the Ravens, have obviously gone elsewhere. So, there is still money to be made even after the draft as teams walk out of the draft and be like, oh man, I didn't address the wide receiver position like we wanted to. Jennings is still out there. Maybe we'll figure out the money and make it work. So not to say that him holding out to this point means that will be signing a shorter term, less guaranteed deal. But at the same time, I do think that the Ravens are probably going to have to win a staring contest with him a little bit if they are going to be the team to get him, because I imagine they're not going to want to brush too close up to the top of the cap with already a couple of restructures that they have on their books.
Yeah, Matt, you took the words out of my mouth. I think we're going to spend these next 3 weeks talking about the NFL draft, how they're going to handle it, all these picks, what positions of need they're going to address, and how that's going to go. And then once the calendar turns from April to May, and the Ravens are going to start looking at, okay, where else do they need to beef up? That's when they're going to strike in free agency or elsewhere.
Absolutely, and you took the words right out of my mouth, but I was going to say our next few episodes now are going to be pretty draft focused, getting closer and closer to the NFL draft, just over 2 weeks away. So we have been kind of holding it off a little bit on talking too much draft stuff because we wanted to make sure we didn't jump the gun and left plenty of runway for us to talk about what is a very important draft that does include a first-round pick for the Ravens, unlike we originally expected, but super excited to kind of dive into several different fronts of the Ravens draft process.
Yeah, number 14, and for those listening, if you have either draft questions or ideas or things you want us to talk about or suggestions about what you think the Ravens should do, let us know. We can read a couple out on the show. It'd be great if people, if any listeners want to send us kind of what they're thinking the Ravens should do. We'd love to kind of bounce those ideas around. It'd be great.
Yeah, maybe we'll put up a couple of social media posts, get some draft questions in there. And make sure to follow us over on Sun Early Birds on Twitter, on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Sam, any final words for the good people?
No, I'm getting really hungry. I need to go home, and I'm excited to be back with you later this week.
Yeah, double dipping. Excited to...
Josh had a long stretch there where he had
did.
like 3 or 4 in a row. So now
Opening day.
Now it's freaking my turn.
You're ripping it back.
Yeah.
I will be in Chicago, so we'll be doing it remotely for that episode. But I will have the latest on whether or not the Orioles were actually able to take care of business out there.
And I won't name drop, but we are hoping to be in the works of scheduling our first Early Birds interview, which would be great.
Super excited
Hopefully
for that.
next week.
Nailing down the details. But for Sam Cohn, I'm Matt Weyrich. Thank you all so much for listening, and have a good one.